Mom banned me from Dad's birthday party until I exposed her. 32-year secret, my name is Sarah. I'm 28. And I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And let me tell you something right now. If you think your family is messed up, wait until you hear what happened to me 3 weeks ago. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty, about keeping secrets, and about what happens when the truth finally comes out. What would you do if your own mother told you not to come to your dad's birthday party? Not just told you privately, but announced it in front of your entire extended family at Sunday dinner like you were some kind of criminal, like you didn't deserve to be there, like you weren't even her daughter. That's exactly what happened to me. And I'm still shaking just thinking about it. See, my family has always been complicated. My mom, Linda, she's one of those women who smiles sweetly to your face, but has a knife ready behind her back. She's 55, been married to my dad for 32 years, and she's always had this weird thing about control, about making sure everyone knows she's the queen of the castle. My dad, Rick, he's turning 58, and he's this gentle, quiet man who just wants everyone to get along. He hates conflict so much that he'll literally leave the room if voices start getting raised. And then there's my older brother, Marcus. He's 31, married with 2 kids, and he's always been Mom's golden child. The one who can do no wrong. The one who gets invited to everything, who gets the good Christmas presents, who gets his mortgage payments helped with when times are tough. Meanwhile, I'm over here trying to build my graphic design business from scratch, living in a tiny apartment, driving a car that's held together with prayer and duct tape. But this story really starts about 6 months ago, when I made what my mother considered the ultimate betrayal. I started dating Jake. Now, Jake is an amazing guy. He's 30, he's a paramedic, he volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends, and he treats me like I'm the most precious thing in the world. But Jake has one fatal flaw in my mother's eyes. He's black. My mom never said it outright, of course. She's too smart for that. Instead, she started with the little comments. Oh, he seems nice. But are you sure you have enough in common? Don't you think it might be difficult for your children someday? I just worry about what people will think. Each comment was like a little paper cut, small enough to brush off individually, but together, they were slowly bleeding me dry. Things got worse when Jake started coming to family gatherings. My mom would be polite to his face, but I could see it in her eyes, that cold, judgmental stare. She'd ask him overly personal questions about his job, his family, his background. She'd make comments about the food he brought, the way he dressed, even the way he laughed. And my dad? He just sat there, silent as always, letting it happen. Marcus was almost worse because he thought he was being subtle. He'd make these jokes about mixed relationships, about how complicated things could get. He'd talk about his kids and how important it was for them to understand their heritage, always with this pointed look in my direction. His wife Emma would just giggle along like it was all so funny. But the breaking point came 3 weeks ago at Sunday dinner. We were all gathered at my parents' house. Mom, Dad, Marcus, Emma, their kids, my Aunt Carol, Uncle Jim, and my cousins. It was supposed to be a planning session for Dad's upcoming 58th birthday party. Mom had been going on and on about the guest list, the catering, the decorations. She was in full control mode, clipboard in hand, assigning tasks to everyone. Sarah, she said, not even looking up from her precious list. I think it would be better if you didn't come to the party. The entire room went silent. Like, dead silent. Even the kids stopped chattering. I felt like someone had just punched me in the stomach. Excuse me? I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Well, she said, still writing on that damn clipboard. You know how your father values family harmony, and with everything that's been going on lately. She glanced meaningfully at the empty chair where Jake usually sat. He couldn't make it that day because he was working a double shift. What exactly has been going on, Mom? asked, my voice getting stronger now, anger starting to replace the shock. She finally looked up, and I swear, there was almost a smirk on her face. You know what I mean, Sarah. All this drama you've been bringing to family events. The tension. Your father doesn't need that stress on his special day. Drama? I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. What drama? You mean me bringing my boyfriend to family dinner? You mean me existing while dating someone you don't approve of? Now don't be dramatic, she said, waving her hand dismissively. This isn't about Jake. This is about your attitude lately. You've been so confrontational, so angry all the time. Marcus cleared his throat. Mom's got a point, Sarah. You have been pretty on edge lately. Maybe it's better if you just skip this one. You know, for Dad's sake. I looked around the room, waiting for someone, anyone, to stand up for me. My dad was staring at his hands. Aunt Carol was suddenly very interested in her phone. Uncle Jim was looking everywhere except at me. Even my teenage cousins, who I thought liked me, were avoiding my eyes. Are you all serious right now? I said, my voice cracking. You're all just going to sit there and let her uninvite me from my own father's birthday party? Sarah, please, my dad finally spoke. But his voice was so quiet I could barely hear him. Maybe it would be better if we just kept things simple this year. That was it. That was the moment my heart completely shattered. My own father, the man who used to read me bedtime stories and teach me how to ride a bike and tell me I could be anything I wanted to be, was choosing my mother's comfort over his own daughter's feelings. Fine, I said, grabbing my purse and jacket. Have your perfect drama-free party. I hope it's everything you wanted. I stormed out, slamming the door behind me, and I didn't look back. I sat in my car in their driveway for 10 minutes, crying so hard I couldn't see straight. I kept waiting for someone to come after me, to tell me it was all a misunderstanding, to invite me back in. But nobody came. The next 2 weeks were torture. I kept expecting a call, a text, something. Maybe Dad would reach out privately and tell me Mom was wrong. Maybe Marcus would come to his senses and realize how messed up this all was. But nothing. Radio silence from my entire family. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself. Jake was incredible through it all, letting me cry on his shoulder and rage about the unfairness of it all. He offered to talk to my parents himself, to try to smooth things over, but I told him not to bother. They'd made their choice. But then, 4 days before Dad's birthday, something happened that changed everything. I was cleaning out my apartment, doing one of those therapeutic deep cleaning sessions where you throw away everything you don't need, when I found a box of old photos and documents that I'd taken from my grandmother's house after she passed away 2 years ago. Grandma Rose had been my dad's mother, and she'd always been my favorite person in the whole world. She was the one who taught me to be strong, to stand up for what's right, to never let anyone make me feel small. I was flipping through old family photos, feeling nostalgic and sad, when I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a folder tucked behind some photo albums, labeled important documents in my grandmother's shaky handwriting. Inside were papers I'd never seen before. Medical records, legal documents, and, this is where it gets really crazy, a birth certificate. Not just any birth certificate. A birth certificate for someone named Michael Richard Thompson, born March 15, 1968. The same birth date as my dad. But here's the thing. My dad's name is Richard Michael Thompson, not Michael Richard, and this birth certificate listed different parents than my dad's official birth certificate that I'd seen before. My hands were literally shaking as I kept digging through the folder. There were adoption papers. Sealed adoption papers that had somehow made their way into my grandmother's possession. Papers that showed that my dad, the man I'd called father my entire life, had been adopted by Rose and Robert Thompson when he was 3 years old. But wait, it gets worse. The birth parents listed on the original birth certificate: James Washington and Mary Washington. My dad was black, or at least half black, and my entire family had no idea. I sat on my apartment floor, surrounded by these papers, and I started laughing. Not happy laughing, the kind of hysterical laughing you do when the universe reveals just how twisted and ironic it can be. My mother, who had spent months making racist comments about my boyfriend, who had essentially disowned me for dating, a black man, had been married to a black man for 32 years without knowing it. But as the initial shock wore off, I started to feel sick. This explained so much about my dad's behavior. His reluctance to talk about his early childhood, the way he always changed the subject when anyone asked about family history beyond his adoptive parents. He knew. He had to know, which meant he'd been living a lie for decades. And then I found the letter. It was tucked behind the birth certificate, written in my grandmother's handwriting, dated just 3 months before she died. To my darling Sarah. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I pray you'll understand why I kept this secret for so long. Your father came to us when he was just a baby, so scared and hurt. His birth parents were young and couldn't care for him properly, and the state was looking for a good home. Bob and I fell in love with that little boy the moment we saw him. We never told Rick about his birth parents because we wanted him to feel like he was truly ours. Back then, things were different. It seemed kinder to let him think he'd always been a Thompson. But as he got older, and especially after he married your mother, I started to worry that the truth would come out someday and cause pain. I know your mother, sweetheart. I know how she thinks, how she talks about people who are different from her. I've heard her comments at family gatherings, seen the way she looks at people. If she knew the truth about Rick's background, I fear it would destroy their marriage. And I couldn't bear to see my son hurt like that. I'm trusting you with this because you're the strongest person I know. You're brave like your grandfather, was kind like your father is, and smart enough to know what to do with this information when the time is right. I hope that time never comes. I hope you can just put these papers away and let sleeping dogs lie. But if your mother ever pushes you too far, if she ever makes you feel like you don't belong in this family because of who you choose to love, then maybe it's time she learned the truth about who she married. Use your judgment, my dear. I trust you completely. All my love, Grandma Rose. I must have read that letter 50 times that night. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything else. My grandmother had given me a nuclear bomb, and she'd trusted me to know when, or if, to detonate it. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the entire day researching. I wanted to be absolutely sure before I did anything. I found records online that confirmed everything. Birth records, adoption records, even found some information about James and Mary Washington, my dad's birth parents. They'd both passed away years ago, but they'd had other children, which meant my dad had biological siblings he'd never met. I also found photos, old school photos from the 1970s that showed a young Rick Thompson, and when I really looked at them, really studied his features, I could see it. The broader nose, the fuller lips, the slightly darker skin that I'd always just assumed was from spending time outdoors. Features that were more obvious in his baby and childhood photos, before years of thinking he was white had influenced how people saw him. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to ambush anyone or cause unnecessary pain. But I was going to that birthday party. And if my mother wanted to talk about family and belonging and who deserved to be there, then we were going to have that conversation with all the cards on the table. The party was at my parents' house on Saturday afternoon. I spent the morning getting ready, printing out copies of the most important documents, practicing what I was going to say. Jake offered to come with me for moral support. but I told him this was something I had to do alone. I showed up right at the start time, 2 p.m., when I knew the whole family would be there, but before anyone had time to drink enough to make things messier than they already were going to be. I walked right up to the front door and rang the bell like I belonged there. Because I did belong there. My dad answered the door, and the look on his face almost broke my resolve. He looked happy to see me for just a split second before the guilt and sadness took over. "Sarah," he said quietly, "what are you doing here?" "It's your birthday, Dad," I said, holding up a gift bag. "I brought you a present." Before he could respond, I heard my mother's voice from the living room. "Rick, who's at the door?" She appeared behind him, and when she saw me, her face went through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. Surprise, anger, embarrassment, and finally that cold mask she was so good at wearing. "Sarah, you weren't invited to this party." "I know," I said, pushing past both of them into the house. "We need to talk about that." The living room was full of people. Marcus and Emma were there with their kids, along with my Aunt Carol, Uncle Jim, their kids, and several of my parents' friends from church and work. About 20 people total, all of whom turned to stare at me as I walked in. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," my mother said loudly, clearly wanting everyone to hear. "Sarah, you can't just show up here after..." "After what, Mom?" I interrupted, setting my purse down on the coffee table. "After you decided I wasn't family enough to celebrate my own father's birthday." The room was getting uncomfortable now. People were shifting in their seats, looking at each other with those awkward, "should we leave?" expressions. "Sarah, please," my dad said, his voice pleading. "Can we talk about this later, privately?" "No, Dad, we can't. Because this isn't just about me anymore." I looked around the room at all these people who'd sat silently while my mother excluded me. "See, I found something interesting while I was cleaning out Grandma Rose's things. Something I think everyone should know about." My mother's face was getting red now. "Sarah, whatever little drama you're trying to create, this is not the time or place." "Oh, this is exactly the time and place," I said, pulling the folder out of my purse. "Because this is about family, about who belongs and who doesn't, about the lies we tell ourselves and the truth we hide from." Marcus stood up. "Okay, Sarah, you're clearly upset, but you need to calm down. You're ruining Dad's party." "Am I, Marcus? Or am I about to make it a lot more interesting?" I opened the folder and pulled out the birth certificate. "Dad, did you know that Grandma Rose kept all of your original adoption papers?" The change in my father's face was immediate and devastating. All the color drained out of it, and he actually took a step backward. "What?" my mother said, but her voice was different now. Uncertain. "That's right," I said, holding up the documents. Dad was adopted, but that's not the really interesting part. The really interesting part is who his birth parents were. "Sarah, stop," my dad whispered. But I was past the point of stopping. "James Washington and Mary Washington," I read from the birth certificate. "Born March 15th, 1968, in Durham, North Carolina." The room was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. My mother was looking back and forth between me and my dad like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "I don't understand. What are you saying?" "I'm saying, Mom, that for the past 6 months, you've been making racist comments about my boyfriend. You've been questioning whether I should be with a black man. You've been worried about what people will think, about our future children, about fitting in." I looked directly at her. All while being married to a black man for 32 years. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was like the entire room was holding its breath. My mother's mouth was opening and closing like a fish. That's not... Rick, tell her that's not true." Everyone turned to look at my dad, He was standing there, tears streaming down his face, and he didn't say a word. "Dad?" Marcus said, his voice barely audible. My dad finally looked up, first, at my mother, then at Marcus, then at me. "I knew," he said quietly. "I've always known." The sound my mother made was barely human. It was like a wounded animal. "Rose and Bob told me when I turned 18, he continued, his voice getting stronger. "They said my birth parents were young and couldn't take care of me, but they wanted me to know where I came from. They had pictures, documents, everything." "Why didn't you tell me?" my mother demanded, and there was something dangerous in her voice. "Because I was scared," he said simply. "I was scared of how you'd react. I was scared you'd leave me. I was scared our children would suffer for it." "Our children," she repeated slowly, like she was testing the words. Then she looked at me and Marcus with this expression I'd never seen before, like she was seeing us for the first time. "That's right, Mom," I said. "Marcus and I are mixed race. The grandchildren you love so much are mixed race. Every single person in this family that you've been so proud of, that you've been using as examples of good breeding and proper families, we're all black." Marcus was looking at his hands, then at his kids, then at his wife. Emma was staring at him like she'd never seen him before. "This is insane," my mother said, but her voice was shaky now. "This is absolutely insane. Rick, you lied to me for 32 years. "I was 3 years old when I was adopted," he said, some anger creeping into his voice now. "I didn't lie to you about anything. I just didn't know how to tell you something that shouldn't have mattered in the first place." "Shouldn't have mattered?" She was getting hysterical now. "Shouldn't have mattered? Do you know what people are going to say? Do you know what this means for our family?" And that's when I lost it. "What this means for our family," I shouted. "What this means is that you're a hypocrite. What this means is that you've spent months treating me like garbage for dating a black man while you've been married to one. What this means is that every racist comment you've made, every concerned look, every worried question about my future has been complete bullshit." "Sarah, please!" my dad tried to interrupt. "No, Dad. I'm done being quiet. I'm done letting her make me feel ashamed for who I love." I turned back to my mother. "Do you want to know what Jake said when I told him you disapproved of our relationship? He said he felt sorry for you. He said anyone who judges people by their race instead of their character must live a very small, sad life. And you know what? He was right." My mother was crying now, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry tears. "How dare you ambush me? Like this? How dare you humiliate me in front of everyone?" "I'm not the one who humiliated you," I said. "You did that all by yourself." That's when Marcus finally spoke up. "Sarah, this is crazy. Even if what you're saying is true, you can't just drop a bomb like this at Dad's birthday party." "Really, Marcus? I can't?" I turned to face him fully. Where was this concern for appropriate timing when Mom uninvited me from this party? Where? Was this concern for family harmony when you were making jokes about mixed relationships? Where was this concern for Dad's feelings when you both decided I wasn't worth defending? He didn't have an answer for that. I looked around the room at all these people who'd been so silent before. "And all of you," I said, addressing my aunts and uncles and cousins. "All of you who sat there and said nothing when she excluded me, who let her turn me into the family problem. How do you feel now? Now that you know the family you've been protecting isn't what you thought it was?" Aunt Carol was crying. Uncle Jim was staring at the floor. Their kids looked like they wanted to disappear. But then something unexpected happened. My dad walked over to me and put his hands on my shoulders. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was clear and strong for the first time all day. "I'm sorry. I am so sorry for not standing up for you. I'm sorry for letting fear control my decisions. I'm sorry for not being the father you deserved, I started. Crying then, all the anger and hurt and disappointment of the past months finally coming out. I never cared about any of that other stuff, I said through my tears. I just wanted my family to accept the person I love. I just wanted to belong. You do belong, he said firmly. You belong here more than anyone, and I should have told you that weeks ago. That's when my mother found her voice again. This is ridiculous, she said, but she sounded defeated now. Rick, we need to talk, privately. No, he said, not taking his eyes off me. I'm done hiding. I'm done being ashamed of who I am. I'm done letting anyone, even you, make my daughter feel like she's not good enough. He turned to address the room. Everyone, I want you to meet my daughter Sarah. She's brave, she's kind, she's talented, and she's in love with a wonderful man named Jake. And if any of you have a problem with that, you can leave my house right now. The room was still silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. Less shocked, more thoughtful. Then my 10-year-old nephew, Marcus's son Tyler, spoke up. Dad, does this mean we're black? Marcus looked at his son, then at his wife, then at me. Yeah, buddy, I guess it does. Cool, Tyler said, shrugging. Can we have cake now? And just like that, the tension broke. A few people actually laughed. My dad hugged me tighter. But my mother wasn't done. I can't, she said, shaking her head. I can't do this. I can't pretend like this doesn't change everything. It doesn't change anything, my dad said sadly. That's what you don't understand, Linda. Nothing about who I am has changed. Nothing about who our children are has changed. The only thing that's changed is what you know about us. Don't tell me nothing has changed, she snapped. Do you know what people at church are going to say? What my friends are going to think? What about the kids' schools, the neighborhood association, everything we've built here? What about it? I asked. Are you worried they're going to take away your membership to the racism club? She glared at me. You don't understand, Sarah. It's not that simple. It is that simple, I said. Either you love us for who we are or you don't. Either we're your family or we're not. Either you choose love or you choose fear. She looked around the room one more time, at all the faces staring at her, waiting to see what she would choose. Then she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I need time to think, she said. I need to process this. Linda, my dad called after her. Where are you going? To my sister's, she said without turning around. Don't wait up. And then she was gone. The party was obviously over after that. People started making excuses and leaving, but not before several of them came up to me privately. My Aunt Carol apologized for not speaking up before. One of my dad's work friends said he'd always thought there was something familiar about Dad's features, and now it made sense. My cousin Jessica, who was about my age, told me she was proud of me for speaking the truth, but the most important conversation was with Marcus. After everyone else had left, it was just me, Dad, Marcus, Emma, and their kids. I owe you an apology, Marcus said, not looking at me. I should have defended you. I should have stood up to Mom. Yeah, you should have, I said. But I understand why you didn't. It's hard to go against everything you've been taught to believe. I keep thinking about all the times I made those stupid jokes, he said. About mixed relationships, about people who look different. God, Sarah, I was talking about us. I was talking about my own kids. Emma was quiet for a long time, then she said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you going to treat my children differently now? Are people going to treat them differently? It was a fair question, and I thought about it before answering. Some people might, I said, but isn't it better to know who those people are? Isn't it better to know the truth about what we're dealing with instead of living in a fantasy? She nodded slowly. I think you're right. I think it's always better to know the truth. We talked for another hour about what this meant for the family, about how to tell the kids more about their heritage, about what would happen with Mom. Dad shared some of the things he'd learned about his birth parents over the years, some of the history he'd kept to himself. It was painful, but it was also healing. When I finally got ready to leave, Dad walked me to my car. Sarah, he said, I want you to know that regardless of what happens with your mother, you will always be welcome in my life. You and Jake both. What about Mom? I asked. What if she can't handle this? He was quiet for a long moment. Then I guess I'll have to decide what's more important to me, living a lie to keep someone comfortable, or living the truth with the people who love me for who I really am. That was 3 weeks ago. My mother hasn't come home yet. She's still staying with her sister, processing and figuring things out. Dad has called her every day, but she won't really talk to him. She just keeps saying she needs more time. Marcus and I have been talking more than we have in years. He's been doing research into our family history, trying to learn about the heritage we never knew we had. Emma has been incredible through all of this, asking questions and trying to understand. The kids seem to be taking it all in stride, the way kids do. As for me, I feel lighter than I have in months. The truth is out, and even though it's messy and complicated and painful, it's still the truth. Jake was so proud of me when I told him what happened. He said I was the bravest person he'd ever met, standing up for love like that. But here's the really crazy part. Remember how I said this story had a twist that would leave you stunned? Well, 2 days ago, I got a phone call that changed everything, again. It was from a woman named Patricia Washington, calling from Atlanta. She said she'd been doing genealogy research and found records showing that her father, James Washington, had a son who was given up for adoption in 1968. She'd been looking for her half-brother for 20 years. My dad has a sister, a biological sister who's been searching for him for 2 decades. They're going to meet next month. And you know what Patricia told me when I explained our situation? She said, Honey, your daddy comes from a family full of strong women who don't back down from the truth. Sounds like the apple didn't fall far from the tree. So here I am, 3 weeks later, and my life is completely different. My relationship with my father is stronger than it's ever been. My brother and I are actually talking and connecting as real people for the first time. I'm about to gain a whole new branch of family that I never knew existed. And my mother. She's still processing. Part of me feels sorry for her. She built her whole identity around being a certain kind of person, from a certain kind of family, with a certain kind of life. And now she has to confront the fact that none of that was real. That the man she's been married to for over 30 years, the children she raised, the life she built, it's all been based on incomplete information. But the bigger part of me thinks this is exactly what needed to happen. Because love isn't about controlling who people are or who they choose to be with. Love isn't about maintaining comfortable lies or protecting fragile prejudices. Love is about accepting people fully, supporting them completely, and standing up for them when the world tries to tear them down. My mom had the chance to choose love over fear, acceptance over control, truth over comfort, and she walked away. But you know what? That's her loss. Because she's missing out on getting to know Jake, who brings me coffee in bed every morning and makes me laugh until my stomach hurts. She's missing out on having a relationship with her granddaughter-in-law Emma, who's turning into one of the strongest women I know. She's missing out on watching her grandchildren grow up proud of all parts of their heritage. She's missing out on getting to know Patricia and the whole Washington family, who are apparently incredible people with stories and traditions and love to share. She's missing out on being part of a family that's real instead of perfect, honest instead of comfortable, loving instead of judgmental. And honestly, if that's her choice, then I feel sorry for her. But I'm not going to spend any more time trying to convince someone to love me. I'm not going to shrink myself to fit into someone else's narrow vision of what family should look like. I'm going to keep building a life with Jake, who sees me and loves me and supports me exactly as I am. I'm going to keep strengthening my relationships with the family members who chose truth over comfort. I'm going to get to know my new Aunt Patricia and learn about the parts of my heritage that were hidden from me. I'm going to be present and honest and brave, the way Grandma Rose taught me to be, because that's what real family is. Not the people who share your blood, but the people who choose to stand by your side when things get complicated. Not the people who love you when it's easy, but the people who love you when it's hard. And if my mother decides she wants to be part of that kind of family, she knows where to find us. But we're not going to wait around for her to figure it out. We're too busy living our truth. So that's my story. That's how I walked into my father's birthday party with a secret that silenced them all, and walked out with a family that was smaller but stronger, messier but more honest, more complicated but infinitely more real. And you know what? I wouldn't change a single thing. Well, maybe one thing. I would have brought Jake to that party after all, because I have a feeling Patricia Washington would have loved to meet him.